The trees shouldn't speak. Not in any language. Not across galaxies. But last night, every root-connected biosphere in the Confederation screamed a single name. His, the old human, the one we laughed at, the one we exiled. Now they're calling him back, and they're calling for blood. I was assigned to Earth as a form of punishment. They called it a repositioning opportunity, but we all knew what it meant. A demotion, a quiet exile for speaking too freely about what I'd seen during the Galactic collapse. My warnings about emergent biosymbiosis were labeled paranoid, unscientific, so they sent me here, to this decaying sphere of stone and water, long since stripped of relevance. Earth once central to the Terran expansionist cycle, now just another quiet, dying world the Confederation had marked as ecologically contained. But Earth wasn't quiet, and it wasn't dying, it was waiting. I arrived on Earth during its twilight years, or so we believed. The planet had been officially downgraded to a Category V preservation zone, which meant minimal interference, strict containment of surviving biological structures, and a full ban on human repopulation. Of the once billions, fewer than 1,000 remained, scattered across the surface in forgotten valleys, deserts, and rain-soaked forest basins. Most lived in silence, alone with their memories and dirt. A few wandered, mad and harmless, and then there was the gardener. He called himself Thomas Wren. No ID chip, no databank record, just a name, 2 hands, and a voice that still held weight when he spoke. He lived at the edge of Zone 7, near the remnants of the Sequoia Ridge mountain chain, once home to trees taller than irises. What remained of them stood up, and half-live bark like old leather roots, thick as buildings. They weren't supposed to be active anymore, but the bioscanners disagreed. They pulsed with something we didn't understand. My first encounter with Wren was unremarkable. I had been sent to monitor the anomalous energy signatures around the root systems. I found him on his knees in the dirt, whispering to the soil as if it could hear him. "You speak to them?" I asked, recording. He looked up at me with soft eyes, like he had already known I'd come. "No," he said. "They speak to me. I just listen." I marked him as eccentric, a relic of a failed species, another human who refused to die with dignity. That night, the trees near his cabin bloomed out of season. 12-meter-high flowering bursts of white and silver exploded into the moonlight. My data feed corrupted 3 times trying to analyze the growth. Every algorithm crashed. It wasn't just biology, it was will. In the weeks that followed, the incidents increased. A Devaran scout vessel, biological craft grown to withstand harsh atmospheric pressures, disappeared over the Amazon relic core. It had entered on a routine pass, measuring chloroplast saturation. It never returned. We sent drones. Found the craft hours later, crumpled like a leaf, suspended in mid-air, held aloft by living vines. No scorch marks, no crash, no distress signal, just immobilized, as if gently placed. Inside, the pilot was still strapped to their seat, face frozen in horror, eyes glazed, no trauma, no blood, no cause of death. Oxygen gone, as if the air itself had vanished. We tried to explain it away. Atmospheric pocket, microbial surge, equipment malfunction. But I knew, and so did Command. We quarantined Zone 3, increased scans. We burned one of the trees in old cypress infected with a strange blue moss. It screamed, Not metaphorically, not biologically, audibly. A high-pitched wail that rattled the teeth of every species with ears. For 7 seconds, the sound blanketed for 1,000 kilometers. It shut down our AI systems. It deafened birds mid-flight. And when it was over, something had changed. The root signals weren't random anymore. They were structured, rhythmic, they said. One word, a name, Ren. We detained him, brought him to base Halcyon. 3 guards, armed. He didn't resist. Just walked slowly, shaking his head like a teacher disappointed in his students. "You cut the wrong limb," he said. "You woke the roots." I sat across from him in the debrief cell, staring at this wrinkled, earth-stained man. I had seen tyrants. I had dissected apex predators. But never had I felt what I felt then. It was fear. "What are you?" I asked. "Just a gardener," he said. "But they remember my voice. They remember who planted them. You. You treat this world like it's dead, but it's only been sleeping." He paused, voice suddenly sharp. "And now it's angry. We ran every test. No implants, no transmitter, no visible connection to the biofield anomalies. Still, the data didn't lie. Where Ren walked, the ground responded. Grass grew faster. Fungi opened and turned to face him. Trees released spores in rhythmic pulses, forming what we later decoded as memory patterns like synaptic firings. The planet was forming a nervous system. The Confederation responded with precision. Zone 7 was declared unstable. They initiated Operation Rootlock, deploying thousands of thermal pulses and incineration pods across active root beds. Fires raged for days. Smoke blackened the sky. We thought it was over. Then the spores came. Billions of airborne seeds, impossible in density and distribution, rose like a fog and moved against the wind. They disabled our drones, entered vents, grew inside filtration tubes. One sprouted from the eye socket of a meson pilot mid-flight. He screamed, then crashed into the sea. We evacuated all outposts, but Ren stayed. They begged me to return to the ship. But I couldn't. I needed to see him again, to understand. I found him standing at the base of the last great redwood. The sky above was dark, clouds pulsing green. The air felt charged like the planet itself was holding its breath. He was humming. The tree before him was glowing thin strands of bioluminescence coursing through its bark-like veins. It leaned toward him, not in the wind, not by gravity, but in reverence. "You need to leave, Virel," he said, without turning. "Why?" I asked, heart pounding. He finally faced me, tears in his eyes. Not of sorrow, of love. "Because they've decided this isn't your garden anymore." I ran that night. The first Confederation Cleanser-class dreadnought was swallowed whole. Roots wrapped around its hull, ignoring shield frequencies, bypassing quantum phase. The ship screamed on open channels before vanishing beneath the soil. 6 more followed. They called it the Green Wake Dot. And from that day forward, Earth was no longer considered a dead world. It was considered a sentient biosphere, a living organism with one remaining voice it obeyed. Thomas, Ren, the old human we mocked, the gardener we once believed humans to be loud, chaotic, and arrogant. Primitive apes wielding weapons they barely understood. They burned their own skies, warred among tribes, and shouted into the stars as if the universe owed them an answer. And when we finally met them during the first galactic contact cycle, We confirmed what our analysts suspected. They were unremarkable. No hive minds, no shared consciousness, no biosilicon enhancements or genome collapses. Their DNA was messy, their politics laughable, their ideologies volatile. They were fascinating, in the way a fire is fascinating just before it consumes the village. So, we contained them, let them fade in silence. But we forgot something. We forgot what humans do. Best when left alone, they grow. When I took over command at the Earth Bioshield facility, the Greenwake event had already begun. I arrived with a force of over 50,000, supported by planetary scanners, atmospheric regulators, and a full fleet of orbital suppressors. Our orders were clear. Root lock protocol. Eliminate all sentient plant mass with regenerative capability. Genetic code fragmentation. Target core chloroplast structures. Neutralize the human known as Thomas Wren. We failed. On every front, Wren was never found again. Not physically, but his voice began to spread. Not across satellites. Not through calm dash channels. Through the trees. It started in New Kyoto Basin. A patrol of Hyrulean warriors cloaked in phase. Armor was swallowed in the span of 11 seconds. Their emergency feed showed movement among the moss, like tendrils reacting to heartbeats. When one trooper shouted, the trees whispered back anger. His body exploded in spores moments later. No bones remained. Elsewhere, a captured human, last survivor of a terror cult in Zone 9, was heard praying before she expired. The gardener is still here, beneath. He speaks for the green. You mean he controls it? I asked. No, she whispered, smiling. He listens. That's why it listens back. Our analysts were baffled. We ran every translation against known energy patterns. We filtered for quantum interference, waves, and even xenotemporal echoes. The conclusion horrified us. The biosphere itself was evolving a distributed consciousness, one that didn't just think, but remembered. It had been cataloging every sound, every step, every violation for decades. The ecosystem had become a neural mesh, rooted not in metal or code, but life, and at the center of its memory, the voice of one human. I authorized First Force Protocol, an elite for query unit designed for psi-environmental warfare. We dropped them into the Sequoia core, shielded and sterile. They lasted 4 minutes. When we reviewed the black box footage, we heard the trees speak again. The bark cracked open and leaked bioluminescent gel that formed symbols, human letters onto their armor. One word. Why? We couldn't explain it. These were plants. No mouths, no larynxes, no sound-producing organs. And yet they spoke in patterns that mimicked grief, accusation, memory, and over time, they learned our languages. They began repeating our lies back to us. We come in peace. The wind mocked. For the greater good, hissed the leaves. You were never meant to return, groaned the roots. And again, that same name, over and over, Wren. Thomas Wren, he who stayed. We now understood. To them, he wasn't a man. He was a seed. A final root in the soil of their rage. Still, the high table didn't relent. They saw Earth's uprising as a biological anomaly, not a threat. A self-aware forest wasn't new to the galaxy. We'd sterilized dozens, but Earth wasn't just self-aware. It was personal. It didn't lash out randomly. It remembered who cut it, and it only punished those who tried to control it. Even stranger, when our drones observed from orbit, they noticed humans were not attacked. The last scattered families who still tended the land old, fragile, and slow were untouched. In fact, the land grew gentler around them. One satellite captured a human child lost in the redwood sector. The canopy opened above her as she cried. A single flower bloomed on her palm, emitting low-frequency pulses that disabled her location beacon. We never found her again. Weeks later, the trees sang a lullaby. In English, we had to rethink our approach, so we did the unthinkable. We sent an envoy. Her name was Selin Var, a Vaqueri empath and diplomatic scientist. She volunteered to approach the core and attempt direct communication. We constructed a suit infused with hardened anti-spore mesh and multi-species neural dampers. She reached the heart of the redwood chamber. She stood in front of the wren treether, one glowing with veins of ancient memory, the one whose bark still bore the imprint of a human palm. We waited in orbit, breathless. "I come to speak," she said. "I am not your enemy. I want to understand." There was silence. Then every tree across Earth moved at once, not blown by wind, not shaken by force. They breathed. And when Selin placed her hand on the bark, she saw. Later, she would try to describe it in her final report. It wasn't words, it was feeling. An entire planet screaming with abandoned grief. Every cut remembered, every forest burned, every species lost. They feel it like a scar across generations. And yet, there was forgiveness. Still, somewhere, buried beneath it all, the gardener had taught them mercy. Selin never left the forest. She became part of it. Some say her voice now hums in the pollen clouds. Some say she stands beneath the canopy, eyes glowing green, watching us from the edge of understanding. But her final transmission was clear. If you want peace, stop cutting, stop ordering, stop thinking you own life. You must ask, because they already answered, and they chose him. From that day forward, we were no longer in control. The Confederation revoked ownership of Earth. No ship may land, no drone may scan. The planet is marked as a Class X bioconscious entity. Contact is forbidden, but some say, if you stand long enough among the trees, if you whisper gently, they'll whisper back, and if they say your name, you're already part of them. I used to believe I was just a man with dirt on his hands, no legacy, no destiny, no purpose beyond the roots and soil. But now the trees tell me otherwise. Now I remember what we forgot. They think I'm just an old gardener. That's the title they gave me when they came back to Earth, wrapped in chrome and arrogance, speaking in codes and scanning every leaf like it owed them data. The aliens looked at me the way a child looks at a broken toy, curious, but disappointed. They never asked why I stayed. They never asked what the trees remembered, because if they had, I might have warned them. I was here when the last Terran colony ship departed. I watched as the skies filled with light and fire and escape. Billions of us left, thinking the stars were kinder than the soil that birthed us. But I stayed, not for loyalty, not for pride, for guilt. I had worked for the terraforming division, helped program the seed drones that chewed through ecosystems on alien worlds. I watched us turn jungles into glass, oceans into vapor, always in the name of civilization, always. Justified, but Earth was different. It resisted, not loudly, not with force. It mourned we burned the lungs of this planet, drove its creatures to extinction, choked the rivers, cored the mountains, and every time we cut, we thought we were improving something, fixing something. We didn't know it was watching. We didn't know it was learning. I first heard the trees speak after the sixth burn. It was just a sound faint, like wind dragging across bone, but it carried weight. It had memory in it, pain, recognition, a tone so specific it felt like someone calling my name in a dream. I thought I was going mad, but then I saw the sap move shimmering under moonlight, not dripping, not leaking, flowing like blood under skin. I touched the bark, and I remembered things that didn't belong to me. I saw a forest being born under fire, saplings crying out in chemical pulses. I saw ancient redwoods sharing knowledge through the soil encoded in carbon and root structure. I felt a single seed fall into a crater and choose to wait for centuries. And I saw myself, young, arrogant, blind, signing off on a deforestation algorithm that triggered the extinction of the last living Terran, snow fern. The trees remembered that too, not just the species. The moment, my hand, my breath, my face. They had catalogued us. Over decades, I began to change. I stopped speaking aloud. I listened more. I stopped cutting. I started tending, not for food, not for harvest, just for relationship, to feel what they felt. And eventually they responded. At first, in patterns, shifting spores, blooming cycles keyed to my presence. Then in deeper ways, I would dream of branches reaching for me before a storm came. And when I awoke, the leaves were still warm from sheltering my roof. I lost track of time. Years passed, seasons blurred, my heart slowed, my bones stiffened, but the trees grew, and in that stillness, they told me the truth. Earth is not a passive world. It never was. This planet is older than the Confederation's calendars can calculate. It has cycled through death and life 1,000 times over. Ice and fire, flood and drought, predator and prey. But something happened when humans arrived. We brought chaos, we brought violence, yes, but also emotion, suffering, joy, music, regret. We poured our inner storms into the soil. Every grave, every kiss, every story etched in firelight or digital ink. The planet kept it all. And when we left, Earth didn't die, it dreamed, and I became its dreamer. The aliens think I controlled the trees. They're wrong. The truth is worse. The truth is, the planet chose to remember me. Of the billions who left, I was the last one who loved it back, the last one who listened when it had no words. And now, Earth is waking. It has rewoven its neural networks through roots and vines and fungal matrices. The oxygen itself hums with encoded frequencies. The planet is no longer a place. It's a mind, and it knows what was done to it. It knows who did it, and it's angry, but not blindly. That's what makes them afraid. The aliens expected wrath, but Earth offers something stranger, choice. It's offering them the same thing it offered us thousands of years ago. You can live here, but only if you learn to be part of something greater than yourself. Most of them can't accept that. They're too proud, too clean, too afraid of dirt. One of them came to me once. A young one, Vaquari, soft-spoken, asked if I could tell the trees to stop growing around their landing pads. I didn't answer. I just placed my hand on the soil and said, "You ask them. I don't speak for them. I just listen." The roots curled tighter around their ship that night, not violently, just protectively, like a parent shielding a child from their own recklessness. I've lived longer than I should have. The doctors would call it cellular regeneration from local pollen interaction. The scientists would run simulations. They'd all miss the truth. I'm not alive because of tech. I'm alive because the trees aren't done with me yet. I'm there. Archive their scar, their voice. I hear the Confederation's dreadnoughts overhead now. The air is thick with static. Another burn attempt, maybe. Another violent bid for control. They still haven't learned. But I'm not afraid. The forest isn't afraid, because it knows what I know. We were never the masters of Earth. We were its lesson, its memory, and now we are its weapon. When the trees whisper my name, it isn't reverence. It's a warning to every species that comes here thinking they can reshape life without loving it first. Ren.Ren. Ren.Ren, it means, he stayed, you didn't. We gave them a warning. We issued 3 official declarations. Cease all unauthorized. Biosphere expansion. Surrender the anomalous human. Subject. Dismantle the root mind growth system. They responded with silence, and then the planet bloomed. I stood on the bridge of the high staring at the impossible readings flooding the screens. The biomass growth rate exceeded theoretical limits by factors of 10. Forests were swallowing old cities overnight. Coral reefs were rebuilding over industrial graveyards. Insects, once extinct, reappeared with new colors, new defense patterns, new behaviors. It was evolution and fast forward. But worse than the biological anomalies was the intelligence. The root systems weren't random. They were forming grids, shapes, structures, and then they began intercepting transmissions. Do not send war, he stayed. He remembers. Do you? Our council debated long, too long. One faction, the core tribunal, argued for total sterilization of the planet. A kinetic asteroid impact, enough to render Earth inert and strip the biosphere. Another, smaller faction led by empathic species, begged for diplomatic re-engagement. I didn't vote. I gave a command. Launch the cryospires. 10,000 silver rods fell from orbit, each programmed to unleash deep frost radiation across critical biomass nodes. The goal wasn't destruction, it was containment. They never touched the ground. The trees caught them. Mid-air, vines snapped up like whips, freezing in motion, but still moving. Roots cracked the ice, bark reshaped, and in less than an hour, the cryospires were buried beneath layers of fungal armor and silken moss. And then came the message, not in code, not in language, in emotion, a wave of grief, rage, and memory washed across our command network. Officers dropped to their knees, weeping. One pilot bit his own tongue off. Another began whispering poetry in a human dialect, thought lost. The planet was inside our minds now, and it was not asking any more. Dr. Anya Sarah, Earth's surface, Redwood Cathedral. Lie came back because I had to know if it was true. They said Earth was alive, that it remembered, that the trees whispered the name of an old man like he was a god. That was nonsense, of course. I'd been raised in the Confederation's finest research halls. I'd published 5 papers on planetary decay cycles. But I was born on Earth, and the soil still smelled like home. When I stepped into the Redwood Cathedral, the silence was thick and holy. I expected to find ruins, but instead I found order trees grown in impossible geometry, branches woven in natural fractals. A humming pulse filled the air, not a sound, a presence. And there he was, Thomas Wren, older than any human should have been, his spine slightly bent, his palms covered in lichen. But his eyes were awake. "You came late," he said, voice dry like bark, "but not too late." I didn't know what to say. I had prepared questions, scientific instruments, recording devices. None of it mattered, because when I stepped forward, the roots moved to welcome me. "They're not attacking," he said. "They're defending. There's a difference." "Against what?" I asked. "History. You're saying Earth knows the past." He looked at me like I was a child. "It is the past. We bled into this soil for millennia. Every war, every love, every death, every fallen civilization, every poem left unread. Earth didn't just grow trees. It grew us, and now it's fighting for what remains." I asked him the question that burned in every scientific journal across the galaxy. Is Earth a threat? He paused, tilted his head, as if listening, only. "To those who forget they were guests here, Commander Jarval Queen, Emergency War Council, we failed to isolate the root mind. We failed to land additional troops. Our AI systems were collapsing. Spore-borne viruses corrupted navigation data. Biofeedback disrupted nanite cohesion. And our pilots, those that hadn't defected drifts to land anywhere, green. But what broke the war wasn't a weapon, it was a message. One of our internal translators, a synthetic historian named Althean, cracked the pulse signals emitted. Through the cloud layer, they weren't defensive signals. They were recordings. Every invasion, every species that had taken from Earth, every promise made and broken, every child who had died in the dirt. Earth hadn't simply built a neural net. It had built a witness archive, and it was broadcasting it back to the galaxy. The effect was immediate. Sympathy surges across neural-linked species. Disobedience among Vaqueri infantry. Dissent within the tribunal. Protests. Hunger strikes. Several factions began refusing to take arms against the root mother. And worst of all, some began worshipping it. Dr. Anya Serra, the first human council in centuries, we gathered at the old world, Trether 1, the satellites called WRN-1. Ren spoke softly, but the forest echoed his words. "This isn't our planet anymore. It never was, but it chose to keep us, and that means we owe it a choice in return." The remaining humans voted to defend, not escape. Even as the orbiting Confederation readied kinetic bombardments, we refused evacuation. That's time. We wouldn't run. Commander Jarval Queen, final phase directive, we authorized one last operation, the Darkvine Protocol, a planetary-scale viral cleanse bomb, designed to target chloroplast frequencies, reduce all plant matter to inert sludge. The device was armed. It never detonated. Instead, it grew roots, and a single word appeared across every screen. No. They say Earth spoke for the first time, in a single voice that night. Every tree, every petal, every blade of grass harmonized into a low sound wave that rippled across orbit. Not just heartfelt, every being on board the High Judicant collapsed to their knees. And when we looked down, the entire planet was glowing, like a heart, beating, alive. The silence after the last transmission was worse than any defeat. The weapon had been absorbed. Earth's sky shimmered with unfamiliar auroras, patterns of light that pulsed not from magnetism, but from memory. Colors no sensor could decode danced in the upper atmosphere like some long-forgotten language reawakened. Every Confederation ship caught within Earth's exosphere fell into blackness. Command systems blinked out. Engines became dead weight. And as if some unseen hand reached into their circuitry, even emergency protocols collapsed. One channel remained, one signal, steady and unbroken, repeated over and over in every known dialect: leave or be replanted. Fleet Admiral Jean Valquin had faced the scar swarms, had survived the binary collapse of Venari the Ninth, but nothing, not even the abyss of space or the screams of his enemies, had ever shaken him like the voice that came not from a transmitter, but from the earth itself. No mouth, no broadcast, just presence. They had mocked the old human gardener, called him a fossil, a relic, a dirt-worshipping waste of sentient potential. And now, the entire command bridge stood in paralyzed silence as the stars themselves whispered his name, Thomas Wren. On the surface, a wind stirred the redwoods that had stood for thousands of years. Dr. Anya Sira stumbled forward, eyes wide, mouth dry. Her hand touched the bark of the central tree, what was now being called the heartwood core. It pulsed, it breathed, and beneath its base, where the ground had split open like some ancient mouth of truth, was a chamber glowing gold and green, wrapped in moss and memory. Thomas Wren stood at its edge. His spine was bent, his hair ghost white, but his eyes burned with something otherworldly. Anya saw no fear in them, only deep, soul-rooted calm. "This is what they never understood," he whispered. "Earth doesn't fight, it remembers." He stepped forward, alone, into the root chamber. The moss lit his path like it recognized him, and at the center, surrounded by a lattice of living wood and crystalline spores, was something that defied explanation. A seed, yet larger than a man. It floated mid-air, pulsing, alive, a record, a brain, a heart. He knelt before it and spoke 3 words: "We are home." Above the sky, shattered with color, the auroras bent and shifted, forming patterns that no longer looked like chaos, but communication. Symbols from lost civilizations, sounds from extinct dialects, the glyphs of the Vakari, the tones of the Andari, even the forgotten whistled. Codes of the original Earth whales, all painting the Air. Confederation officers who watched the data feed broke ranks. Some dropped to their knees, others simply wept. The transmission that followed wasn't words, but feelings, grief, joy, fury, love, all flooding every open channel. Entire species fell into temporary communion. The planet was speaking, not as a battlefield, not as an opponent, as a parent. The Vaqueri admiral aboard the flagship of the Third Armada placed his ceremonial blade on the floor and said aloud, "You cannot conquer what gave birth to you." It began then not an evacuation, but a retreat in reverence. One by one, ships turned away from orbit, lighting their engines in silence. Earth did not pursue, it did not gloat, it simply watched. Below, in the chamber, Thomas Wren lay on the moss, his strength gone. His hand rested on the seed. "You're not dying," Anya whispered, kneeling beside him. "Not dying," he said, barely audible, "becoming." Vines wrapped gently around his limbs, not to bind, but to join. The moss pulsed in rhythm with his slowing heartbeat. His breath eased. The roots trembled with resonance. And as he closed his eyes, a final gust of wind swept through the redwoods. The forest did not mourn, it sang. A song of return, of apology, of remembrance. In the days that followed, the Confederation reclassified Earth from hostile zone to memory sanctuary. Pilgrims came, not just humans, but Mern prophets, Andari scholars, Devaran. They walked the route paths barefoot. They left behind stories and tokens. Some spoke to the trees, and, it was rumored, The trees spoke back. No weapons were permitted, no conquest allowed, just stories, songs, soil, and near the center of it all, where the heartwood pulses quietly and the moss never fades, there stands a tree unlike any other dot, tall, gnarled, bark like folded time. They say if you stand there long enough, when the wind moves just right, you'll hear something, not in your ears, in your bones, the whisper of a name, Wren, and you'll understand that Earth did not win the war, it ended it, by remembering us all back into itself. They used to laugh at the old man in the garden, now they bow in silence beneath his roots. The war is overwrought, least in the way most understand it. No formal treaty was signed, no parades, no victory chants, only the silence of a galaxy breathing again after holding its breath to long. Earth remains untouched, but not unscarred. The Confederation fleet, once a symbol of unstoppable power, has splintered. Some factions dissolved immediately, others vanished, choosing exile over facing what Earth had become. A few still linger in the outer systems, lost in existential paralysis. Not a single ship dares orbit near Earth. Not anymore. The planet is encased now not in shields or walls, but in memory. Living, breathing, growing memory. Its atmosphere hums with whispers only the trees understand. Species who once mocked the fragility of organic life now send emissaries in reverent silence, asking questions, offering apologies, leaving artifacts at the garden's edge like mourners at a grave they never believed in until it was too late. The whisper trees, as they are now called across dozens of worlds, have begun to sprout in foreign soil. Not violently, never violently. Their seeds drift, like thoughts, like memories. Those who plant them do so with a strange mix of awe and guilt. The trees grow differently on every world, but one thing is constant. They speak the name of Wren, not in words, in feeling, in memory. A whisper that curls around the mind like smoke. The Confederation archive, now splintered and decentralized, holds a single file in its most protected vault. It contains the original Earth flora genome, tagged as cultural anomaly. Do not interfere. That label alone has caused riots, debates, and philosophical crises across institutions that once prided themselves on logic and order. Some say Earth isn't a planet anymore. It's an idea, a living relic, a sacred infection of thought. Others say it never was just a world. It was always watching, waiting, cultivating more than just flora, but the true price of survival. That's not something recorded in any archive. Humanity has changed, not visibly. They still laugh, cry, build, destroy, love. But there's something quieter beneath their skin, now something older. They've learned that their greatest weapon was never invention, or aggression, or even adaptability. It was patience, memory, roots, and the cost. Wren, the last gardener, no. Human can find the tree that holds him now. It's said it only reveals itself when you're ready to hear the truth, not the truth of the universe, but the truth of yourself. Some travelers hear his name in the wind and turn away, afraid. Others sit in silence beneath the canopy, weeping. And some just a few return changed, calmer, quieter, as if they left something behind. No monument stands for Wren, but across galaxies, on distant worlds, in towering cities and silent deserts. One phrase has begun to take root in every language, etched into stone and whispered in ritual. The roots remember. And sometimes, late at night, when the stars align just right and the air is still. The trees whisper more than his name. They whisper yours, because the old gardener didn't just wake up the trees, he woke up us all.